Okay, and here we are back in sort of the dread of winter in a January day here in Michigan. We haven't had a lot of snow here. Gosh, I bet we haven't had more than 2 inches. And of course, the lake effect machine in other areas would beg to differ, I'm sure. But where's that when we want it? I enjoy the seasons. Anyway, on those long days, I picked up another example of what I'll call the big box store 45 inch. And these were made in what, 6 different liveries, for lack of a better word, machine. And you're seeing these more and more now at pawn shops, hardware store, end of year, new year auctions, trade ins, people that don't know what to do with them. They don't want to pay the repair costs. Lawn and garden places out in the back and the junkyards, picking them up there. And there's more and more of a variety of, they're not commonplace. They're just a bigger example of what is commonplace on a larger scale. And, what I want to pay note here is that the Yardman example and the Cub Cadet example are quite different in some very interesting ways. These augers, for example, in the Cub Cadet example, have 6 shear bolts for 6 redundant parts of the auger. And the fans and whatnot are all the same. And the Yardman example isn't like that at all. It has bolts, and there would be 2 of them, shear bolts in the mouth of that machine. And it's much more brawnier, if there is such a word, much more rigid, I think, in this man's opinion. Very interesting. And after that, heated grips and headlights and all that baloney that you don't really need. So when you look at these augers versus the Cub Cadet, these are heavier. They're different in the way that they foil the snow in. And after a while, with the abrasives of the different surfaces, and I speak of the example that I just picked up, a lot of people have stone driveways or a combination of stone and concrete. Anyway, those abrasive materials wreak havoc with that housing, mar it all up, and it's not very smooth. It's very porous, and they wear down like the fingers of a garbage disposal that's kind of ineffective, or those little knives. And they're not as effective. And then you notice, hey, it works, but yeah, it's not as good as it used to be. And in these examples, there's a lot of junk around the shop. They're pretty nice to work on, and you can engineer some solution to that, and I'm going to show you that here. So, here's a thing where somebody gave this some thought, and you'll separate, if you will, the halves, the forward half, the business end, if you will, and then the engine side of things. And what these do and how they work in most all examples anymore is that you dowel these on a dowel. So on the latter half, the one behind the mouth here, there are these dowel bolts, and you simply index these little chambers on those dowels and then tip the halves back together to kind of cinch the deal back up. So it comes apart, and you can split the halves, if you will, rather easily. Not a big affair. So I got one up, one up on the left, and you look at that comparison, and it's quite a difference. And I thought, well, what can I do here? Kill some time, have some fun. Kind of boring around here. And what I opted to do is take this assembly out while I had this half off, because I'm in here, nestling some grease into the bearings and that sort of thing, just looking for preventative maintenance. And those little hands or fingers, if you will, on that fan blade, amid that I just prefaced, were considerably worn down. Even in my example, with the limbs and trees and stones out at the end of the road and whatever. Anyway, as is normal, just like a lawnmower blade, and you need to sharpen it once in a while. So in that very thought, what you do, or what I opted to do, is take that auger right out. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with you? Well, let me see what I can do with mine first, and then I'll look at you, because this one I picked up for real cheap, and it's just worn right down to nothing. And I got it out in that last inch of snow we had, and it's not throwing well at all. So, man, there's got to be something I can do to work in the setting with an OSHA machine because the chutes don't articulate on these things. And, it's kind of dumb because it's always going to come off the same spot. And then the geometry of that chute doesn't necessarily afford one a means of really throwing snow really far. And yeah, don't they? Every car that goes by when you meet up with the machine at the road is always looking you at them in the mirror in their car when they go by. And, maybe sometimes they lose. Smart ass. And, so you take those halves, and now we're going to open this up, and we're going to look at that impeller. And there it is, that I just spoke of. And, yeah, those little knives or those little hands are worn right down. And there's a pretty good amount of material there. So what I opted to do was grow these back, if you will, about 5/8 of an inch. And the first thing that I did is went to my local tractor supply place and got some steel stock about that same length or width, and both, I guess, and cut them. And then you'll see that on that end of that fan blade now, ready to weld or tack into place. Now I don't lay claim to be the expert in welding, and I'll clean this all up. But anyway, you get the idea with that tip now or that extension now welded on that fan. And, we got to consider balance and that sort of thing. And here's, again, one of those little knives or fingertips, if you will, before anything's happening. So you can see the vice grip already holding the one that's now ready to be tacked in place and, understand where it is I'm going. So in the end run here, these little hands, if you will, kind of yum that snow up after that auger centers it all and kind of ingests it in its mouth, which is what a snowblower is. But the interesting thing here with these examples is that there's no redundancy. In other words, in the old school, the auger was turned by a chain on the side, and the fan was separate on a shaft. These are one and done with a universal, kind of dainty, my opinion. And, the rate is proportional to one to the other, because they're both turning at that rate. And after that, a gear ratio is going to come into effect. So here's now that remedied, my solution for a fan. And while you're in there, check that alignment. Some would call it a thrust bearing or fan shaft bearing. Rather than a bronze cindered bushing, that's a bearing. So, back to that tractor supply place. You know where you go in the back room and it's cold and the doors are up and the forklifts are running in the back? Well, they have this material at the doorway to separate the store or the heated half and to that of the cold environment in the back, with these things hanging like a car wash to kind of hold the air at bay, hold the heat in and keep the cool out. So I opted to line my housing, that very porous housing, with some good construction adhesive and cut a 4.5 inch, in this example, flap or strip of this stuff to perfectly line that barrel. Think of what a slippery, beautiful deal that is. It's right up to steel. It's got a good backing. It's reinforced. Man, that stuff is angry. I can't even cut it with scissors. And there's a strip of it there to give you an idea of what it is I'm talking about. And I know you can picture in your mind where I'm going and where you see this stuff. Where do you get it? I have no idea. Somebody may be able to think of something even a little better than rubber. Some may even want to reline that center housing with, maybe some, a metal fabricator could cut a nice metal strip. There's those drift busters, and those are junk. And the smart aleck who added some lighting and to look at that auger to have that night effect. We talked about that earlier in the other video. That's possible to do. LEDs make anything possible. You simply port it with a plug there and they sip current. But here's this old school that I prefaced and I've talked about in other videos. A 65 or 67 model Yardman with that non-OSHA compliant stuff that we all love. Look at the particulate in the air. All the ice and snow it's throwing, it'll throw 100 feet. That's put up or shut up. And, everybody's got a little sister anymore, and her name is Sue, right? Everybody's suing everybody. So you have to make a machine where you can't take off your hands and sue anybody. So that's what these little taffy turning things are. And they can be respectable. They have their place. But look at that little auger and that big mouth. So most of it's show drift busters. Well, everybody's got an opinion. That's mine. So yeah, there's that finished fan with those little fingers. Back to that premise of the maybe the garbage disposal thought to kind of collect and grab that snow on this 945 Cub Cadet model. Had a lot of fun doing it. Now we'll get some snow. Well, I'll let you know. The vote's not in yet. So spray some Pam, won't you, in that mouth and around that entire circumference and on that fan. Boy, you should be slippery, slidey, greasy lightning, and maybe throw 30 or 40% further. The rest, isn't it, is dependent upon motor speed. In this machine's example, it's just a kind of a blunderbox Tecumseh motor, but it's 13 horse. That's what, 230 some cc? Don't know. I'd have to look at my charts. So it's respectable. And then the gear range does, doesn't it? What else needs to be done? So, yeah, get the junk drawer out, get the grinding discs out, and by the way, don't forget to vote. I bet you can't guess who I voted for. Take good care. I'm Tommy Z.